5 documented paranormal encounters from taxi and Uber drivers. The transportation industry has produced some of the most compelling paranormal encounter reports in modern folklore, as drivers working late-night shifts encounter passengers in situations that defy rational explanation. Unlike traditional ghost stories tied to specific locations, these accounts come from professional drivers whose livelihoods depend on their credibility and judgment. The intimate, confined space of a vehicle creates unique conditions for supernatural encounters, while the transient nature of rideshare work means that drivers often experience phenomena in multiple locations throughout their careers. What makes these reports particularly intriguing is their consistency across different cities, time periods, and driver backgrounds. Professional drivers from around the world have reported remarkably similar experiences: phantom passengers who vanish from moving vehicles, riders who provide addresses to locations that no longer exist, and encounters with entities that seem to use rideshare apps to interact with the living world. These documented cases represent encounters reported to police, emergency services, paranormal investigators, and rideshare companies, creating a body of testimony that challenges our understanding of how supernatural phenomena adapt to modern technology and urban transportation systems. If you really like our channel, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more daily horror stories. Thanks. Number 1. The Phantom Passenger of Highway 169, Minnesota. In October 2019, Minneapolis Uber driver Michael Chen documented one of the most thoroughly recorded phantom passenger encounters in rideshare history, when his dashcam captured an entire ride with a passenger who, according to multiple forms of evidence, should not have existed. Chen, a software engineer who drove part-time for additional income, received a pickup request at 2:47 a.m. for a ride from the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport to an address in the Uptown District. The passenger appeared normal when Chen arrived at the designated pickup location. A well-dressed woman in her 30s carrying a small suitcase and wearing clothing appropriate for business travel. She provided the destination address clearly and engaged in polite conversation about her flight and business in Minneapolis. Chen's dashcam recorded the entire 23-minute journey, including clear audio of their conversation and video showing the passenger seated in the rear of his vehicle. The supernatural nature of the encounter only became apparent when Chen arrived at the destination address. The passenger thanked him for the ride and exited the vehicle normally, but when Chen checked his rearview mirror moments later, she was nowhere to be seen. More disturbing was his discovery that the address she had provided led to an empty lot where a residential building had been demolished 6 months earlier. Chen's review of his dashcam footage revealed anomalies that hadn't been apparent during the ride itself. While the audio clearly captured both sides of their conversation, the video showed Chen apparently talking to himself, with no visible passenger in the rear seat. Temperature readings from his vehicle's climate control system showed a dramatic drop in cabin temperature during the ride, despite the mild October weather and no apparent cause for the temperature change. The Uber app confirmed that a ride had been requested and completed, with payment processed through a credit card account. However, when Chen contacted customer service to report the incident, he discovered that the account associated with the ride belonged to Sarah Mitchell, a business consultant who had died in a car accident on Highway 169 exactly 1 year before Chen's encounter. Mitchell had been traveling from the airport to her uptown apartment when her vehicle was struck by a drunk driver at the same time of night that Chen received his supernatural ride request. Investigation revealed that Sarah Mitchell had been a frequent Uber user, with over 200 completed rides on her account before her death. The account had remained active in the app's system despite her death, as family members had not thought to deactivate it when settling her estate. The supernatural ride was charged to a credit card that had been canceled immediately after Mitchell's death, yet the payment was processed successfully with no explanation from the credit card company or Uber's payment system. Chen's experience was corroborated by multiple forms of technological evidence that contradicted rational explanation. GPS tracking showed his vehicle following the exact route requested by the passenger, with stops and turns that corresponded to verbal directions that appeared on his dashcam audio but not video. His phone's accelerometer detected weight shifts in the vehicle consistent with a passenger entering and exiting, despite no visible evidence of anyone other than Chen in the vehicle. The psychological impact on Chen was profound and lasting. Despite his background in software engineering and generally skeptical approach to supernatural claims, he could not reconcile the technological evidence with his personal experience of interacting with a passenger who appeared completely real and normal. He continued driving for Uber, but reported ongoing anxiety about late-night airport pickups and requests to the uptown area. The case attracted attention from paranormal investigators who noted that Chen's encounter fit a pattern of phantom passenger reports from drivers working routes that pass through locations of fatal accidents. The phenomenon suggests that some spirits may retain their habitual behaviors after death, continuing to use familiar services and travel patterns while remaining unaware of their deceased status. What makes Chen's case particularly compelling is the integration of supernatural activity with modern technology. The phantom passenger was able to request a ride through a smartphone app, process payment through digital banking systems, and interact with GPS navigation technology while remaining invisible to video recording equipment. This suggests that paranormal phenomena may be adapting to contemporary technology in ways that challenge traditional understanding of how spirits interact with the physical world. Number 2. The hospital route that leads to the past, Chicago. Chicago taxi driver Roberto Martinez documented a series of encounters in 2020 that challenged his understanding of time, death, and the nature of reality itself. Martinez, who had been driving taxi in Chicago for over 15 years, began experiencing rides that seemed to transport him not just to different locations, but to different time periods, all connected to passengers seeking transportation to hospitals that had been demolished or relocated decades earlier. The phenomenon began in March 2020 when Martinez received a dispatch call to pick up a passenger at an address in the South Side. The caller requested transportation to St. Mary's Hospital, a major medical facility that had been demolished in 1987 to make way for urban development. Martinez assumed the caller was confused about the hospital name or location and drove to the pickup address intending to clarify the destination with his passenger. The passenger who entered Martinez's taxi was an elderly man who appeared to be in significant distress, clutching his chest and asking to be taken to St. Mary's emergency room as quickly as possible. When Martinez explained that St. Mary's had been closed for over 30 years, the passenger became agitated and insisted that he had been treated there recently for his heart condition. The man provided detailed descriptions of the hospital's layout, staff members, and recent renovations that matched historical records of the facility's appearance in the early 1980s. Against his better judgment, Martinez decided to drive to the location where St. Mary's had once stood, hoping to redirect the passenger to the nearest current medical facility. However, as they approached the demolition site, both Martinez and his passenger could see a fully operational hospital building, complete with ambulances, emergency lighting, and medical staff visible through the windows. The building appeared exactly as St. Mary's had looked during its operational years, despite the fact that the location currently housed a shopping center. The supernatural nature of the encounter became undeniable when Martinez's passenger exited the taxi and walked into the hospital building, disappearing from view as he crossed the threshold. Martinez sat in his parked taxi watching medical personnel move about inside the building for several minutes, before the entire structure gradually faded away, leaving him looking at the familiar shopping center that had replaced the hospital decades earlier. Martinez's taxi's GPS system and meter recorded the trip to the hospital location, with timestamps and distance measurements that matched a normal hospital run. However, his dashcam footage showed him driving to an empty parking lot and sitting alone in his vehicle for the duration of the passenger interaction. Radio communication with his dispatch company confirmed that they had no record of sending him a pickup call at the time he received the St. Mary's request. The encounters continued over the following months, with Martinez receiving dispatch calls to transport passengers to medical facilities that had been closed, demolished, or relocated years or decades earlier. Each passenger appeared to be genuinely in need of medical attention and completely unaware that their destination hospital no longer existed. The passengers could provide detailed, accurate information about these defunct hospitals, including the names of specific doctors, room numbers, and medical procedures that could be verified through historical records. Investigation revealed that all of Martinez's phantom passengers had been patients at the hospitals they requested, but had died either in those facilities or shortly after receiving treatment there. Medical records showed that many had died during medical emergencies, similar to the conditions they displayed during their supernatural taxi rides. suggesting that they were trapped in continuous loops of their final journeys to seek medical care. Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, a psychiatrist who studied Martinez's case, noted that the encounters followed patterns consistent with crisis-related hauntings, where traumatic events create spiritual imprints that replay under specific conditions. Martinez appears to be encountering souls who died while seeking emergency medical care, Dr. Gonzalez explained. Their desperation for medical attention created such powerful spiritual impressions that they continue to request transportation to hospitals where they once received treatment, unaware that both they and the facilities have passed into history. The psychological toll on Martinez was severe as he began to question his role in these supernatural journeys. He wondered if he was helping trapped souls find peace by completing their final journeys, or if he was prolonging their spiritual suffering by participating in endless loops of failed attempts to reach medical care. The uncertainty about his moral obligation to these phantom passengers created ongoing anxiety that affected his ability to work normal shifts. Martinez's case represents one of the most documented examples of temporal displacement experienced by transportation workers, suggesting that some paranormal encounters may involve actual travel through time rather than simple ghost sightings. The integration of past and present in these rides challenges our understanding of how traumatic events can create lasting spiritual impressions that persist beyond the physical structures where they occurred. Number 3. The children's hospital pickup that shouldn't exist, Boston. Boston Lyft driver Jennifer Walsh experienced an encounter in September 2021 that forced her to confront the possibility that some ride requests come from passengers who exist between life and death, seeking transportation to destinations that serve the living and the dead simultaneously. Walsh, a nurse who drove for Lyft during her off hours to supplement her income, received a late-night pickup request that would challenge everything she thought she understood about her medical profession and the nature of human suffering. The ride request came at 11:43 p.m. for a pickup at Boston Children's Hospital, with a destination address in a suburban residential area about 20 minutes from the hospital. Walsh found the timing unusual, as visiting hours had ended hours earlier and the hospital typically restricted late-night access to emergency cases and immediate family members. However, she had transported worried family members and medical staff before and assumed this was a similar situation. When Walsh arrived at the designated pickup location outside the hospital's main entrance, she found a woman in her 40s who appeared to be in emotional distress. The passenger carried a small overnight bag and wore the exhausted expression common among family members who had been maintaining bedside vigils. She thanked Walsh for the quick response and provided the suburban address where she needed to be taken. During the ride, the passenger explained that she had been staying at the hospital while her 7-year-old daughter received treatment for leukemia. She described the medical procedures, the hospital staff, and the daily routine of a parent whose child was fighting for life with heartbreaking detail that Walsh recognized from her own experience as a pediatric nurse. The woman's knowledge of medical terminology and hospital protocols seemed authentic, as did her emotional exhaustion and desperate hope for her daughter's recovery. As they approached the destination address, the passenger asked Walsh to wait while she retrieved some items from her home, explaining that she needed to return to the hospital before morning rounds. Walsh agreed to wait, watching as the woman walked up the driveway to a modest 2-story house and entered through the front door. After waiting for nearly 30 minutes without seeing any lights turn on inside the house or any sign of the passenger's return, Walsh decided to check on her welfare. The supernatural nature of the encounter became apparent when Walsh discovered that the house was completely empty and had been abandoned for several years. Windows were boarded up, the utilities had been disconnected, and a real estate sign indicated that the property was scheduled for demolition. More disturbing was Walsh's discovery that the overnight bag the passenger had been carrying was sitting on the front steps, as if it had been carefully placed there rather than dropped or forgotten. Walsh's investigation of the passenger's story revealed a tragedy that explained the supernatural encounter, while raising disturbing questions about the nature of consciousness and parental love. Hospital records confirmed that a 7-year-old girl named Emma had indeed died of leukemia at Boston Children's Hospital, but her death had occurred 3 years before Walsh's encounter. The child's mother, Patricia, had spent months at her daughter's bedside before Emma's death, fitting the description and behavior of Walsh's phantom passenger. Further investigation revealed that Patricia had committed suicide 6 months after her daughter's death, unable to cope with the loss and overcome by guilt about her inability to save Emma's life. The abandoned house where Walsh had dropped off her passenger was the family's former home, which had been foreclosed after Patricia's death and remained empty while legal issues surrounding the estate were resolved. The overnight bag found on the front steps contained children's clothing, medical supplies, and a journal documenting Emma's treatment that Patricia had kept during her daughter's illness. The journal's final entries described Patricia's determination to save her daughter and her desperate search for additional treatments and second opinions that might offer hope. The bag appeared to contain items that Patricia would have brought back to the hospital for her daughter's comfort during treatment. Dr. Michael Reynolds, a paranormal researcher who studied Walsh's case, suggested that the encounter represented a form of spiritual repetition, where parental love transcends death, creating ongoing attempts to fulfill caregiving responsibilities that were interrupted by the child's death. Patricia appears to be trapped in a loop of caregiving behavior, Dr. Reynolds explained. Her love for Emma was so powerful that death couldn't interrupt her determination to be present for her daughter's treatment, even though both mother and child have passed away. Walsh's experience as a pediatric nurse gave her unique insight into the psychological dynamics of the supernatural encounter. She recognized the specific behavioral patterns of parents coping with a child's terminal illness, and understood the desperation that could drive someone to continue seeking care even after hope was medically impossible. This professional knowledge made the encounter more emotionally devastating, as Walsh could appreciate the depth of love and loss that had created the spiritual phenomenon. The case raised ethical questions about whether healthcare workers have special responsibilities when encountering supernatural manifestations of medical situations. Walsh wondered if she should have attempted to provide comfort or guidance to the phantom passenger, or if participating in the supernatural journey had somehow enabled ongoing spiritual suffering rather than providing relief. Walsh's encounter demonstrates how paranormal phenomena can intersect with professional expertise, creating situations where living individuals become unwilling participants in the unresolved tragedies of the dead. The case suggests that some spirits may seek out specific types of people, in this case, a healthcare worker who could understand and empathize with their medical situation, to help them process traumatic experiences that prevented peaceful transition after death. Number 4. The wedding dress delivery to nowhere, Atlanta. Atlanta rideshare driver David Thompson documented an encounter in June 2022 that began as a routine delivery service, but evolved into a supernatural investigation involving love, loss, and the power of unfulfilled promises to transcend death itself. Thompson, who provided delivery services through multiple apps in addition to passenger transportation, received a special delivery request that would challenge his understanding of commitment and the lengths to which human devotion can extend beyond the grave. The delivery request came through a specialized courier app at 10:15 p.m. on a Saturday night, with instructions to pick up a wedding dress from a bridal shop in downtown Atlanta and deliver it to an address in the historic Inman Park neighborhood. The request included a substantial tip and a note explaining that the delivery was urgent due to a family emergency that had prevented normal pickup during business hours. Thompson had handled similar after-hours deliveries before and saw nothing unusual about the request. When Thompson arrived at the bridal shop, he found the package waiting outside the store in an elegant garment bag with detailed handling instructions, and the delivery address clearly marked. The package was accompanied by a note from someone named Sarah explaining that the dress was for her wedding the following day, and that she would be waiting at the delivery address to receive it personally. The note expressed gratitude for the emergency delivery service and included additional payment information. The delivery address led Thompson to a beautifully preserved Victorian house in one of Atlanta's most historic neighborhoods. As he approached the front door with the garment bag, he was met by a young woman who matched the description provided in the delivery notes. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, wore an elegant cocktail dress appropriate for a wedding rehearsal dinner, and expressed relief and gratitude at the dress's arrival. Sarah invited Thompson to bring the dress inside while she verified its condition and prepared his payment. The house's interior was decorated for a wedding celebration, with flowers, candles, and elegant table settings that suggested preparations for an intimate ceremony. Sarah explained that she and her fiancé had planned a small home wedding, due to budget constraints and family preferences, making the dress delivery crucial to their next day ceremony. As Sarah examined the wedding dress, she shared details about her relationship and wedding plans with the enthusiasm typical of brides on the eve of their wedding day. She described meeting her fiancé at college, their engagement after 5 years of dating, and their excitement about starting their married life together. Thompson found her obvious happiness infectious and felt honored to have played a small role in ensuring her wedding would proceed as planned. The supernatural nature of the encounter became apparent when Thompson returned to his vehicle and attempted to process the delivery completion through his app. The address he had just visited was listed in the app's system as a vacant property with no current residents, and his GPS showed that he was parked outside an empty house with no lights or signs of habitation. When he looked back at the Victorian house where he had just delivered the wedding dress, he saw only darkness and deterioration. Thompson's investigation revealed that the house had been the site of a tragic fire in 1987 that had killed a young woman named Sarah Mitchell on the eve of her wedding day. Sarah had been preparing for her ceremony when an electrical fire started in the house's vintage wiring, trapping her in her upstairs bedroom. She had died from smoke inhalation while still wearing her wedding dress, which had been destroyed in the fire along with all the wedding preparations. Property records confirmed that the house had remained vacant since the fire, with several renovation attempts failing due to financial problems and construction difficulties. Neighbors reported occasional sightings of lights and activity in the house, particularly around the anniversary of the fire, but investigations by police and utility companies had never found evidence of unauthorized occupancy or electrical activity. The most disturbing aspect of Thompson's investigation was his discovery that the bridal shop from which he had supposedly picked up the wedding dress had been destroyed in the same fire that killed Sarah Mitchell. The shop had been located on the ground floor of the Victorian house, with Sarah's family operating the business while she lived in the upstairs apartment. The wedding dress Thompson delivered had been the same dress Sarah was to wear at her own wedding, which had been scheduled for the day after the fire. Dr. Amanda Foster, a folklore specialist who studied Thompson's case, suggested that the encounter represented a form of spiritual wish fulfillment, where unresolved desires create temporary reality alterations. Sarah's anticipation of her wedding day was so powerful that it continues to manifest on the anniversary of her death, Dr. Foster explained. She appears to be recreating the wedding preparations that were interrupted by the fire, including the final delivery of her wedding dress. Thompson's deliveries records showed that he had driven to both locations and spent time at each address, with mileage and timestamps that corresponded to a normal delivery service. However, security footage from nearby businesses showed his vehicle parked outside empty buildings, while he appeared to be making deliveries to vacant properties. The payment for the delivery service was processed successfully, though the credit account used for payment had been closed since 1987. The psychological impact on Thompson extended beyond the supernatural encounter itself to questions about the nature of love and commitment. Sarah's continued preparation for a wedding that had been prevented by death demonstrated a level of devotion that transcended mortality, forcing Thompson to consider whether the strongest human emotions can reshape reality itself to fulfill their deepest desires. Thompson's case represents one of the few documented instances where supernatural phenomena have successfully integrated with modern digital technology and delivery services, suggesting that spirits may be adapting to contemporary systems to fulfill unfinished business from their mortal lives. The encounter raises questions about whether technology designed to fulfill human needs can be manipulated by entities whose needs extend beyond the physical world. Number 5. The recursive route through Pine Valley Cemetery, Portland. Portland Uber driver Maria Santos experienced a series of encounters throughout 2023 that suggested some ride requests create loops in time and space that trap both drivers and passengers in endless journeys that can only be completed when the spiritual purpose of the trip is finally fulfilled. Santos, a college student studying psychology who drove nights to support her education, began receiving ride requests that challenged her understanding of death, memory, and the power of unresolved guilt to create supernatural phenomena. The phenomenon began in January 2023 when Santos received a pickup request at 3:22 a.m. from an address near Pine Valley Cemetery, Portland's largest and oldest burial ground. The passenger requested transportation to a 24-hour diner on the other side of the city, a route that would normally take about 30 minutes. Santos had transported late-night workers and insomniacs before and saw nothing unusual about the request, despite the cemetery location and early morning timing. The passenger who entered Santos's vehicle was a man in his 60s who appeared deeply troubled and spoke little during the initial part of the journey. He gave his name as Robert and explained that he was unable to sleep and hoped that a change of scenery might help with his insomnia. As they drove through the empty Portland streets, Robert began sharing details about his life that suggested he was struggling with profound regret and guilt over past decisions. Robert explained that he was visiting Portland to attend his estranged daughter's funeral but had arrived too late for the service and burial. He described a relationship destroyed by his alcoholism and neglect, missed opportunities for reconciliation, and his desperate desire to apologize for the pain he had caused. The depth of his remorse and self-recrimination was evident in every word, creating an atmosphere of sadness that filled the vehicle. As they approached the diner destination, Robert asked Santos to make a detour past Pine Valley Cemetery so he could see his daughter's grave, even though visiting hours were over and the cemetery was closed. Santos agreed to drive by the cemetery entrance, hoping to provide some comfort to a grieving father who had missed his final opportunity to say goodbye to his child. The supernatural nature of the encounter became apparent when they reached the cemetery, and Robert asked Santos to wait while he walked to his daughter's grave. Despite the locked gates and late hour, Robert was able to enter the cemetery grounds and disappear among the headstones. Santos waited for over an hour before deciding to check on his welfare, but found the cemetery gates still locked and no sign of her passenger anywhere on the grounds. When Santos returned to her vehicle, she discovered that Robert was already seated in the back seat, apparently waiting for her return. He seemed unaware that any significant time had passed and asked her to continue driving to the diner as originally planned. However, as they drove away from the cemetery, Santos noticed that they were approaching the same pickup location where she had originally collected Robert, despite having driven in the opposite direction. The loop repeated itself exactly, with Robert entering the vehicle as if for the first time, providing the same destination, sharing identical details about his daughter's death and his regret, and requesting the same detour past the cemetery. Santos realized she was trapped in a supernatural cycle that reset itself each time they completed the route, forcing her to relive the same tragic ride indefinitely. Over the following month, Santos experienced the Robert loop dozens of times, always beginning with the same pickup request at 3:22 a.m. and following identical dialogue and route patterns. She began taking detailed notes about their conversations and testing whether she could alter the outcome by changing her responses or suggesting different routes. However, the supernatural program seemed immune to variation, resetting itself regardless of any changes Santos attempted to introduce. Dr. Jennifer Liu, a paranormal researcher who studied Santos's case, suggested that the recursive ride represented a form of spiritual purgatory where unresolved guilt creates repetitive loops that must be completed until the underlying emotional conflict is resolved. Robert appears to be trapped in an endless cycle of attempting to reach his daughter's grave, Dr. Liu explained. His guilt over missing her funeral has created a supernatural pattern that forces him to repeat the journey indefinitely. The breakthrough in understanding Robert's supernatural loop came when Santos researched the passenger manifest records for her ride history and discovered that Robert Henderson had indeed been a real person who died in a car accident while driving to his daughter's funeral in 2019. Henderson had been traveling from California to Portland when he was killed in a collision caused by his decision to drive while intoxicated, ironically repeating the alcoholism that had destroyed his relationship with his daughter. Cemetery records confirm that Henderson's daughter, Lisa, had been buried at Pine Valley Cemetery 3 days before her father's death. Henderson had been traveling to Portland for reconciliation and to attend her funeral when his own drunk driving caused the accident that killed him. His death meant that he never reached his daughter's grave or had the opportunity to apologize for the years of neglect and abandonment that had defined their relationship. The resolution of Robert's supernatural loop came when Santos realized that she needed to help him complete his emotional journey rather than simply his physical transportation. During one iteration of the recursive ride, instead of waiting outside the cemetery, Santos accompanied Robert to his daughter's grave and encouraged him to speak aloud the apology he had been carrying for years. As Robert finally expressed his remorse and asked for forgiveness at Lisa's graveside, the supernatural cycle was broken. Santos's final ride with Robert ended not with another reset to the pickup location, but with his peaceful disappearance at his daughter's grave, where his spiritual form seemed to merge with the moonlight before fading away entirely. The recursive ride request stopped immediately afterward, and Santos never again received pickup calls from the cemetery location at 3:22 a.m. The case demonstrates how rideshare drivers can become inadvertent therapists for supernatural passengers whose unresolved emotional conflicts create repetitive spiritual patterns. Santos's experience suggests that some paranormal encounters require active participation and empathy from the living to help trapped souls complete their unfinished business and find peace. Her psychological training proved essential in recognizing that Robert's supernatural loop was driven by guilt rather than geographic confusion, and that resolution required emotional healing rather than transportation services. Thank you for listening. If you really like our channel, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more daily horror stories. Thanks.